On February 6, 2026, the Interbehavioral Research Lab at McNeese State University will be hosting the first International Congress of Interbehaviorism. If you don't know what interbehaviorism is, that's okay. Most people don't. That is sort of the point of the Congress. Our goal is to advance interbehavioral psychology and adjacent fields by sharing and discussing contemporary research, theory, and obstacles. The first day of the Congress comprises a one-day conference, which you can attend in person or online. The next 2 days consist of discussion among invited presenters. For more information, you can visit our website, www.ibxrl.com. In preparation for the Congress, we are asking each of the invited presenters some questions about themselves, their work, and interbehaviorism. In this video, we talked to Mitch Fryling, the Associate Dean in the College of Education at California State University, Los Angeles.
Well, my name is Mitch Fryling, and I consider myself to be an interbehavioral psychologist. I am from Michigan and probably always was interested in a career that was helping people in some way. I, like many people, kind of bounced around through different majors and all of that, and found myself in a psychology major that was very, very behavioral. At Western Michigan University, and kind of slowly came around to like, well, this is a pretty cool way of looking at the world. And I think, I've said many times that I was always drawn to one really important part of any behavioral perspective, and I think that the interbehavioral view is a really good one on this, but is that there's an emphasis in really understanding the context of things. And to me, that is so great because it shifts our focus on the person. And I'm always worried when I kind of feel an analysis or a way of talking about things that seems to be blaming someone for their actions, or including when you hear people blaming themselves for things. So I'm always really interested in the context and kind of understanding what's going on in a situation, and like what part of that could be moved around a little bit to try to help someone. So that kind of happened. I fell pretty deep into being interested in behavioral psychology and behavior analysis, and then when I went to school in Reno, I would say then I was pretty blown away by the interbehavioral kind of way of looking at things, especially in some way, and I think I'll talk about this in a second too, but just it was a really broader way of doing all of those things I just mentioned. Kind of, if there was a looking at the context, you want to be able to look at it in a way that's super holistic and includes everything. And so I kind of fell for interbehavioral thinking while I was a student in Reno, and I've been really interested in that ever since. So I spend a lot of time thinking about interbehaviorism still, and yeah, that's a little bit about me, I guess. I don't know if I have research interests per se in the traditional way of thinking about research interests, but really broadly speaking, I have been spending a lot of time over the years on how we can integrate interbehavioral thinking into what might be called kind of more traditional behavior analysis. And usually that involves kind of looking at some area, some concept, some kind of philosophical idea, and wondering how we can kind of push that away from its current sort of linear way of kind of being, or way of operating, or way of talking about it. So I've spent a lot of time doing that, and I still kind of am interested in really broad issues related. So maybe we could call them even kind of systems issues, where kind of looking at meta stuff within a way of looking at behavior and how that could be always broadened. And I think that I'm always kind of feeling for how things could become more interbehavioral. Again, kind of just related to my own kind of personal interests and how we can broaden if we're interested in understanding the context, we've got to do that in the most comprehensive way we can. So I'm always thinking of some kind of meta things like that. I guess more recently, though, and more recently, I mean, like the last few years, I have really wanted to connect interbehavioral psychology in particular to areas of work that are more closely aligned with application or clinical work. So just along those lines, I've been working a lot on relationships over the last few years, and how to conceptualize relationships, how relationships become closer, how conflicts arise within relationships or misunderstandings happen. And I really think that interbehaviorism is a really good kind of foundation for that topic in particular, because, if you think of it at the most fundamental level, relationships are they're the double-headed arrow that interbehaviorism, like, to me, is like, it's not like this, it's like this. And I think that relationships kind of align with interbehavioral psychology really well in that way. So I've been working on that topic, and especially interested in kind of personally and professionally in models of relationship building, especially behavioral models. So for example, functional analytic psychotherapy, where there's a really good thing happening there, where relationships are being built and we're exploring things within the context of a relationship and how that happens and how to make that even more relational. So anyway, that's a kind of particular project that I'm interested in lately. I plan on presenting on, my interests in application have me really thinking about setting conditions again. It's not that I wasn't thinking about them before, but as I experience the world more and try to understand different things happening, it just continues to be more and more clear how important really broad setting conditions are, and how, this is something that interbehaviorism, I think, and interbehavioral psychology in particular, always kind of emphasizes, that I'm always drawn towards it, this kind of, interrelated whole event approach. But there's a part of it, and I think it's all one thing, and I don't really like talking about parts, but for the purposes of analyzing things and really talking, looking at things more deeply, maybe, I've been very interested in the construction of setting conditions, and in particular, how we can kind of push that idea into case conceptualizations and analyses of what's happening in applied situations, and how that might be a kind of angle to even further contextualize and improve the way that we provide support to people. So I'm going to be presenting on something related to that, and yeah, that's that. Okay, why should I care about interbehavioral psychology? I don't know if you should care or not. It depends on what your interests are. But I can tell you why I do. I think there are a couple of really broad things that keep me really interested in interbehavioral psychology. And I'm not only interested in interbehavioral psychology, but one is this, it's a part of the behavioral um, group of, if there's a behaviorisms, it's one of those. And by it being one of those is I'm happy to be promoting something that helps us move away from ways of talking about people and the world in a way that kind of is a pointing fingers, blaming, and really, really trying to do thorough analyses of the context. So I like it for this, it's not blaming the individual. I like it because it's not dualistic. I'm a pretty holistic thing. So anytime there are kind of this and that kind of things happening, I always kind of wish that it was all of that. So I like that it's not dualistic. I like that it's non-linear. I don't find myself living in a world that is so like this. So I like that about interbehaviorism too. And it always keeps me curious about some other thing. So it kind of leaves this, I don't feel like something is done, because I always think there's something more to learn and to discover. And I don't think that we're likely to be kind of like done. The world is really, really complicated. And I think that interbehaviorism and interbehavioral psychology kind of align with my experience of how complicated things are. Okay, what advice do I have for students who might want to learn more about interbehavioral psychology and interbehaviorism? There's lots of different ways you could learn more. I think you could read some interbehavioral writings. I think going straight to some of J.R. Cantor's work is great. Sometimes there are kind of summary articles that you might want to like find an article that provides an overview of something and then kind of like go in more depth later. So I could see that also. I think talking to people is really important, because sometimes the writing kind of is like, what? And there is some kind of unpacking and exploring kind of what that means for you and your work. And I think also you can always stay curious about things and keep learning more. I think I'm always learning something else about interbehaviorism, or being reminded of something that I read a long time ago and rereading that again and being like, yeah, that's the cool thing that I was thinking about lately. And so I think to, stay open and curious and start by asking questions and getting information, and then seeing how it aligns with what you want to do. So